Be with you this evening, and I appreciate the Chamber for having this sort of opportunity presented to us. When I think about Chamber of Commerce organizations, I think about the role that the Chamber plays with small business and really businesses of all sizes as we encourage business and investment and growth in that aspect of our economy. I've been privileged to work for about 23 years helping businesses, both small all the way to multinational global organizations, use technology to better serve their clients, to reinvent themselves, to find new ways to do more with less. And it's been a real privilege to work with businesses in that sort of fashion. The businesses I see, whether large international life sciences organizations or small regional firms, there's a common thread. All businesses are stressed, and they're faced with this perpetual challenge of how to do more with less, and how to reinvent themselves, how to leverage technology and the changes of technology. So it's been a real privilege to work with such organizations, and that experience has led me over many years to realize the best thing we can do for businesses is get government out of the way. What businesses need, what families need, what individuals need is very, very similar. We need less government, more liberty. It's a very simple sort of formula. A fellow today at the door said to me, he said, just get out of our way and we'll do quite well by ourselves. And so that's the kind of theme we continue to explore in this conversation, is how we move Texas along, both our region and Texas, toward less government and more liberty. So look forward to the conversation tonight. Thank you.
Mayor.
Okay, thank you to the Chamber for giving us this opportunity tonight. I want to thank my wife Pokey for being here tonight with us, and you know, she's been along for the ride for 10 years as mayor. You know, ladies and gentlemen, this election is going to be a clear choice of you know, the candidate, the person that's going to represent you in Austin. And there's a whole lot of challenges you heard tonight from our Senate candidates about the various challenges that we face. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that, you know, in 2005 when I was elected mayor, my main objective was there was thousands of people volunteering in this community that really were looking for leadership. They were looking for leadership from the standpoint that they felt like the city wasn't moving forward. They felt like there was things that needed to get done that just weren't getting done. And they also felt disengaged. And I think that's a problem we see in House District 7. There's many good conservative Republicans that have sat back and said, you know, it doesn't really matter what I think. And so they stay away from the process. Well, let me explain. My main objective as mayor was to bring people together for common issues, to find solutions, to make the quality of life of our community better. And I feel like there's people sitting in this room, there's people watching tonight that spent a lot of time developing projects for the city to work on to move our community forward. I was happy to be part of that solution. Are you giving me thank you.
Did he run over? You both have been spending a lot of time taking questions in gatherings like this one, and I know you've met with probably thousands of voters in the course of your campaigns. I'm wondering if you could tell us what issue has topped voter concerns and how are you planning to deal with it? That's for Mr. Watts.
At the door, and we've knocked on thousands of doors, the most common, as we speak to folks, we say, tell us what's on your mind. What issues are top of your mind, top of your list? The number one issue, the border, illegal immigration. What are we going to do to stop the flow of illegal immigrants across the southern border? And so that is the number one issue. How do we address it? Number one, I've explained to folks it's a two-part structure, two-part solution. Number one, you've got to secure the border. Now that requires more DPS troops, more National Guard troops on the border. Liberals in the Texas House let that effort die. Finally, it was able to be resurrected until we could bring back over $800 million worth of money to secure the border. There was a second effort that was really vital to that, and that's called an interstate compact. The Constitution allows states to make an agreement with another state, like New Mexico, like Arizona, such that we can enforce federal immigration laws ourselves. The Supreme Court says Congress doesn't get a say unless we're taking authority away from the feds. That effort again died in the Texas House because liberals let it die. They don't want to secure the Texas border. So that's the first step of the process, though. Real leadership in the Texas House to get that done. The second part of the process is to turn off the incentives. There are a lot of incentives that pull people across. Healthcare, jobs, welfare, free education, in-state tuition. These incentives pull people across. So it's a two-step process. Turn off the incentives. And number two, really secure the border. The feds won't do it. Texas can do more. And that's how we address that number one issue that I hear at the door.
Well, you know, border security is very important, and I think there's a lot of things that the last legislative session did from the standpoint of putting another $800 million into a project that the federal government ought to be working on. The main thing that my opponent forgot to mention about what brings both here, the drugs, and of course we obviously have to deal with that. Ladies and gentlemen, and obviously immigration's a major issue, but I want to tell you the number one issue today at the door, and I'm proud I have a lot of my team here tonight. We've done a lot of our grassroots since June knocking on doors. We're probably in the neighborhood of 25,000 doors knocked on so far. Today it's about jobs, ladies and gentlemen. When you knock at that door, there's so many people today that are hurting. Their children or someone they know no longer has a job, or they just lost a job. They can't get health insurance. Insurance is out of sight. They can't afford their health insurance. Their 401ks are going down the tubes. People today are very concerned with the fact that our local economy, our region is suffering mightily from the decline in oil and gas business. And I'll assure you, as your next state representative, I have worked with economic development in the region and with other mayors. I'm proud that every mayor in this region has endorsed me. We will work together to find ways to bring technical companies and other diversification into our economy here locally.
Thank you. This will be for you first, Mayor Dean. As you know, East Texas voices are often drowned out in the legislature by those representing more urban areas of the state. Is it a priority for you to increase the influence of East Texas? And if it is, how would you do that?
Well, you know, this is a process, ladies and gentlemen. I hear all the time people talk about various members of leadership in the legislature, but you know, it's a system of government that says that you work with other people. Again, I go back to my experience as mayor. You know, I was a part of a council. I was one of 7 members of a council. We had task forces and numerous opportunities to work with other groups to discuss and to work on solutions to issues. You do the same thing. It's the same thing in Austin. You can't go down there in Austin and take your position and you're smarter than everybody else and you're not going to listen to anybody else's ideas about things. That's wrong. You know, the citizens of House District 7, they hire their representative. They select us to go and represent them and to do what we know is the best thing for them in Austin. But it starts with working collectively with the members of House District 7, with the citizens, to make sure we understand what you think the issues are, and then we're your advocate and your liaison down in Austin with the other membership. And I heard tonight again from the Senate debate, you know, from Texarkana to Beaumont, we have got to work together closely. That hasn't happened in the past, so we can fight the metropolitan areas with their numbers. We can do that.
Good. Yes, absolutely. We need to increase the influence of East Texas in the Texas legislature. One of the ways we do that is when we win this primary, March 1st, we begin a process throughout the district from Ore City to Big Sandy, to Diana, to Lakeport, to at White Oak and Longview and all points in between, of town hall meetings where we begin visiting beginning in April, and we begin working together to formulate an action plan, because guess when session starts? January 2017. Now, unfortunately, leadership in the Texas House wastes the first month of session. They waste, everybody knows session starts January 1. Assignments for committees are not given out in the last session. It wasn't until 1st of February, an incredible waste of time of your taxpayer dollars, because session is already only 5 months. But we have to be absolutely ready to go as a region and working together and knowing our priorities. What we do also is partner with fellow state representatives in this region. I'm pleased that Matt Krause, just a little bit to our east, Matt Schaefer in the Tyler area, both have endorsed my campaign. We are ready and willing to work together to formulate the right plans and the right action for this area. Now here's the trick. You've got to show leadership. You've got to be bold. You've got to go there, not with a spirit of defeatism or collaboration, but leadership to say, here's what we're going to do. This is what we're going to work to do. And here's the real principle. Even one state rep can kill bad legislation. Matt Schaefer, for example, became a professional at killing bad legislation. And when people know that you're willing to stand up and kill their legislation, they start cooperating. And you start getting done what you need to get done. Thank you.
I guess this is somewhat of a follow-up to that question. As an elected official, do you think it's more important to make decisions based on your own beliefs and what you think is right? The concerns of the voters or relationships with your colleagues?
Well, I think it's a combination of all. But again, I think it's wrong for any elected official to put themselves above and beyond what their constituents think or what their thoughts are. You know, today walking neighborhoods in White Oak, I spent 45 minutes talking to one person about education, and we didn't exactly agree to begin with. By the time that 45 minutes was over, you know, we weren't real far apart. Okay, and so it's a, and again, from an experience base as mayor, you know, my job was to listen to people and then to work with the other council members, to work with staff. It may have been a regional effort that we were working on, but it's to work with everybody to get the input, to vet through an issue. And then, I've mentioned this many times, I'm not at all intimidated by having people smarter than me about an issue around me to help me make good decisions, because I think at the end of the day, we end up with a good product for the citizens of House District 7. And again, I think we did that here in the city of Longview. We can be very proud of that.
We are to be guided by our U.S. Constitution and our Texas Constitution. We are to go into office with an affirmed oath that we will honor both of those. That's not negotiable. For example, if my district wanted me to expand Medicaid, I will not. That is a threat to liberty. And if that's not satisfactory, you can remove me from office. You see, I will not violate the Texas or the U.S. Constitution. If, for example, somebody wants me to violate the Second Amendment, I will not. You see, we go to office with foundational guiding principles. Everything else is negotiable. Everything else we listen and work on. I've even visited the folks at the door who said, I don't like this open carry business. You know, there's a bunch of hotheads out there carrying. I said, I understand what you're saying now. You do realize that all the people open carrying were concealed carrying before, weren't they? And she kind of says, yeah, I didn't think about it that way. You see, that's the way we show leadership. We go with our foundational constitutional principles of less government and more liberty. And folks will disagree, and we'll talk, and we'll reason together, and we'll say, did you think about this? Did you think about that? I remind folks that sometimes say, I don't like all this open carry stuff. I remind folks, have you heard of Vermont? You know that little state up in the Northeast? You know, the home of the raging socialist Bernie Sanders? You know, Bernie? They've had open carry for more than 100 years. Can you imagine that? More than 100 years, Vermont. Now, if they can, why can't we? And so this is how you reason together, but you go with a set of unyielding, uncompromising principles that you don't bend. A lot of ideas you can bend and adjust, but not these foundational constitutional principles. Thank you.
This will be for you first, Mr. Watts. Since you said that you would vote against expanding Medicaid, I'm hoping that you can expand on that and explain to us why. As you're aware, Texas has the highest rate of uninsured people in the nation. Our state's healthcare providers have struggled because of that fact. We've seen hospitals and clinics close in this state while we haven't accepted Medicaid funds under the Affordable Care Act that our taxpayers are paying that are going to other states. So I'm wondering if you can help us understand why you would be opposed to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the question. Part of Obamacare, of course, tempts states to expand Medicaid. We must not, we should not. Here's the issue, it's bait and switch. The federal government will provide funding for a while, get us hooked on that, and then pull that funding away. And then when your governor says, we've got to raise taxes, we've got these Medicaid expenses, well, then you see the problem that develops. It's sort of like the drugs that first time's free, they say, then you're hooked, and that's a problem. And we're smart enough in Texas not to do that. Now here's the issue. We face lots of challenges, and here's my approach in business and in this arena as well. We face a challenge, as the questioner has asked. We face a challenge of uninsured Texans. What do we do? That's the question. How do we approach the challenge? First, we realize it's a manufactured crisis because we have a whole patchwork of regulations that prevent insurance companies from competing across state lines. It's a manufactured sort of crisis. Is there a crisis in life insurance? No. You can go to Esurance, you can get quotes from North Dakota and California. You can get quotes that are tiny little insurance policies and big insurance policies. Cadillac plans and little Volkswagen plans. Now, if we had real competition for health insurance across state lines, where the government got out of the way and we were able to offer little slim plans because you're 25 and you're pretty healthy, or Cadillac plans because you retired and you got a lot of money and you want a Cadillac plan, that would solve this problem. It's a manufactured problem by the government, and the government is dangling a false solution in front of us when the free market can solve it. It's a perfect example. We need less government and more liberty. Thank you.
Mayor Dean.
The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, that the state of Texas is burdened with an Obamacare plan that just hadn't worked. And you can throw, well, we should or we shouldn't have taken Medicaid, and I've heard very good argument on both sides. I know a lot of it. I'm proud of being endorsed by the Texas Medical Association. A lot of the doctors right here locally are part of that. And I've heard their cries and what they go through. You know, if you go into a doctor's office here in Longview, they have anywhere from 1 to 2 people that are sitting there doing nothing but looking over the paperwork to make sure the doctor has pulled the right switch. Have you been to your doctor lately? And I've been going to the same doctor, my general doctor, my annual physical for 30 years. We used to get to sit down and visit a little bit. He's up at the computer the whole time, and we don't get to talk about hardly anything. And then when he gets finished, that has to go back over here, and some person, clerical person, looks over the bill and makes sure he charged properly for what he charged, and it just goes on and on and on. So, you know, the real issue here is that we have to figure out a way to deal with all the regulatory issues that we face that makes insurance so high. The deductible, there's so many people hurting with insurance right now, and they give them a different plan, but the deductible doesn't cover anything. They don't have drug costs anymore, or what they do doesn't cover anything. Listen, Medicaid isn't the answer, but the answer is not to sit back and do nothing. The answer is to go into and have a comprehensive overhaul of healthcare, and it's going to start in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. This one will be first for you, Mayor Dean. We've been blessed over the past couple of years with sufficient rainfall pretty much across the state that right now few areas of the state are even in a state of drought, and we haven't had water emergencies at all for the past year. That's taken some pressure off of the call for attempts from the Dallas area to take water from East Texas. It's also, I think, possibly slowed down efforts to address water shortages across the state. I'm wondering if you think that the state has done enough to help provide for the future needs, the future water needs for our growing state, and what more could be done.
How long do we have to answer that question? I'll give you a couple. I can do my whole time on Dallas Plus because I've already dealt with them in my job as mayor. You know, a lot of people have already forgotten about 2011 and 2012. You know, Longview was a hub for fighting wildfires in this region. That was not very long ago. Today we're watching water that's being let out of Lake Tawakoni coming down to Sabine, flooding us at a time before the spring rains even start. There's a lot of water out there. Ladies and gentlemen, look, this is the main thing, is I was in the middle of negotiating 3 different long-term water contracts, Lake Cherokee, Lake of the Pines, and the last one was Sabine Water. And let me tell you what, Sabine Water, we couldn't get our contract done, they kept extending. And to show you how Dallas works, okay? Well, they were in the throes of putting together a deal with the Sabine River Water Authority, and they were gonna run a pipeline from Toledo Bend to Lake Tawakoni, and they were gonna use the Sabine Channel as their right-of-way. And the reason they didn't want to negotiate with Longview, we had the largest amount of acre feet in that particular region. And what they were doing was they were holding off in renegotiating our contract so they could get a contract done with Dallas so they could get the rest of the ratepayers to pay for the water pipeline. So therefore, they couldn't give us a price for our water. We threw the towel and said no. We forced them to negotiate. We put together a new contract. And the new contract says that what we can do is we can actually sell our water, which we are today doing, to other cities in the region. I think it's up to the state to put together programs for each area of the state, and they shouldn't depend on taking our water because what they're not doing in other parts of the state.
Thank you.
Have we done enough to provide for water needs across Texas? I think the answer is no. We're growing in an immense sort of way. Water is critical. We have the water here in East Texas. You get a little west of here, and it's a problem. And the further west you get, the more of an issue it is. I'll differ in one key point. It's not up to the state to determine the water plans across the state. It's up to each region. We need local, regional influence and control over each region's water supply and water plans. The problem with the Dallas approach is to build a large reservoir, and not in our district, but just north of here. It would impact us. And to use that Dallas sort of influence over East Texas land. The second problem with it is you combine the mandates and the dictates of the EPA, which state that not only when you flood that existing area, you have to set aside more land because of that wetlands and the bottomlands that you flooded. And so you get a lot of regulatory control. Now, we always say, federal regulatory control, we always say, when are we going to push back on the federal government? When are we going to push back and stop that sort of abuse? The issue is, the problem is we take so much federal money in Texas, it's hard to say no. It's like living at home if you're 40 years old, living at home, and somebody says, get off the couch. You're going to get off the couch. You're dependent on them. And in Texas, we take so much federal money. 35% of Texas budget comes from federal sources. How are we going to tell the federal government no, when we simultaneously have our hand out saying, give me, give me, give me? It doesn't work. What we need is leadership in the Texas House that says, you know what, that 35% number, let's work it down to 34%. Let's go to 33, 32, 30%. Let's have a plan of action so Texas becomes more financially independent, and then we can better manage our own water without the EPA breathing down our neck.
Thank you. This will be for you first, Mr. Watts. Governor Abbott has called for a convention of states to make proposed amendments to the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. That requires a vote of the legislature. What would be your vote and why?
My vote would be yes, with protections in place. The issue is, this is a constitutional mechanism that allows us to go to a convention propose amendments. First of all, you have to have 2/3 of the state legislatures agree to call for this convention. It allows us to go to a convention and to wrestle and argue with proposed amendments. Then with the convention concluded, then 3/4 of those state legislatures have to then ratify a particular amendment. Each amendment needs 3/4 of the states to say yes. It's by definition and by structure a very lengthy process and one with safeguards built in. Now, the key issue here is it is going to be hard to ever call for and get an Article 5 convention, let's face it. To get 2/3 of the states to call for it will be tough. One of the greatest values, though, is just in the threat. One of the greatest values is for the Supreme Court and for the bureaucracies and the federal government to know we are threatening and we are serious to do this. And when it's done, if it's ever done, the Supreme Court doesn't get a say. And Congress doesn't get a say. And the president doesn't get a say. If I remember history correct, when there was a constitutional amendment to change the way we elect senators, they used to be appointed by the legislatures and they were changed to direct election. Part of that was the states were threatening the president. If you don't do it, we will. The president gave his support to this effort. I'm not saying it was good or bad, but the fact is pressure is what it often takes. Thank you.
Thank you.
On Article 5, I've been pretty outspoken and been contacted numerous times about Article 5, and I would support that convention. However, I believe that there has to be very strict guidelines because this thing could turn into who knows what if there aren't those guidelines. I think a balanced budget amendment would be something we should consider. And God knows right here locally, the federal overreach in particular, like our EPA, as mayor, I fought as part of the Northeast Texas Air Quality Board to fight the EPA overreach on our NOx emissions in our ozone, and we brought that under control, and now all of a sudden they're sending all together new standards that can't be met, ladies and gentlemen. They're gonna run our power plants out of business, and today we are so blessed to have the lowest electric rates in the state of Texas because we fought to not be regulated in East Texas. Go to Tyler and their residential and commercial rates for utility are 30% higher than what they are right here in Longview. And they are trying to take that away. What I want to back up for a second though, my opponent has talked about federal dollars and 35%. I'd like to see that we get a larger share for every dollar that we send to the federal government in the state of Texas, that we get a bigger share of our money back. So I think we need to make sure to know how much money we send in the federal government that we're not getting back. And I don't think that we got to continue talking about threatening, okay? If we do our homework right and we work together as a state and as a region, we do our homework right, we can get things done we need to get done without having to threaten people with Article 5 or with legislator over in Tyler, Mr. Schaefer.
Thank you. Let's talk about some state funds for a little while. In November, a wide majority of voters approved a constitutional amendment to dedicate additional funds to our highway maintenance. Those are funds only for highway maintenance. They won't go to pay for new road construction, and we have quite a bit of maintenance needs that have been unmet for a while. Now, we're seeing that the decline in oil and gas revenues is going to cut even more from that transportation funding. I'm wondering what efforts you support, and this is for you, Mayor Dean, I believe first. What efforts you support to expand the highway system to meet the needs of our growing state?
Rick, that's a great question, obviously, and it's one that seems to get further and further from having a good answer or outcome. Here locally, we were blessed to be able to work on some really great projects together with the county and with TxDOT because we could afford to put cash up front so that we could get special consideration to get projects done here locally. For instance, George Ritchie extension as one particular project. Now with the oil and gas downturn in the funds that were being dedicated from that aren't going to be there, we have a serious problem. You know, the monies that were, you know, through the amendment that was just approved by Texas voters, that really wasn't enough money to begin with. I mean, that's a patchwork deal. I know Senator Eltite talked about, you know, a gas tax increase of some sort to help fund projects. But ladies and gentlemen, what we're gonna have to do is what we had to do here locally. First of all, let's determine exactly what the true need is. We haven't seen that. You know, we put together a program here locally where we did a pavement management study. We brought people in. We knew every year what it took for us to keep our roads up to at least a number 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being great. Okay? 7 was an acceptable level of road, of us having a dependable road. I think the state of Texas has to do some of the same things. What type of money are we really talking about? And I don't think there's anybody here tonight or actually in Austin that can tell us what monies do we actually need so we can really put together long-term planning to address that problem.
Yeah, the question of roads and the funding for roads is a key question, and I'll agree with this much. It is a hard number to get a handle on. Exactly what's the standard we want to adhere to for quality of roads, number of lanes, the connections between locales and so forth. And what does that really cost? But here are some principles that we have to factor in. Number one, we stop redirecting tax dollars to go to other places. We use the gas tax. We don't raise the gas tax. I disagreed with Eltite when he proposed that idea. You don't raise the gas tax. You find ways to do what you do when times are tight. You cut back in other areas. You find ways to spend less. You stop redirecting tax dollars to other locations. You know, one of the things that I've noticed about the city here, you know, our bus system here in the city, you ever wonder what that cost? $2.5 million last year, that bus system. You ever wonder what that makes in terms of ticket sales? About $347,000. Now you wonder where the difference comes from, $2.1 million? Primarily, a large federal Department of Transportation, Texas Department of Transportation grant. Money that should have been spent on roads and bridges, redirected to public transportation that is not serving a large number of the citizens, where the roads and bridges serve everybody. So perfect example. You also eliminate a lot of the corporate welfare that's going on. Money to NASCAR, money to Formula One. These are the kind of expenditures you stop and you say, no. Fundamental role of government. Roads, bridges, public protection, these sort of things, public education. You refocus on the fundamentals.
So a follow-up to that, for you first, Mr. Watts, and then Mayor Dean, you said that you wouldn't support an increase in the gasoline tax. Let's just play devil's advocate and say we do need more money for highways. Where's it going to come from?
Sure. Where does it come from? Well, we do what you do as an individual. In state government, we do what you do. First of all, you learn to live with less. You learn to find waste. You learn to say, that's an optional sort of thing. And here's an example. Even in city government, recently the city has dealt with the challenge of animal shelter. Now, we had an animal shelter that was outdated, too small, and just not functional. That's a legitimate challenge. How did the city approach it? The city approached it by saying we spend $5.75 million on a new shelter. That's a lot of money. Now it's interesting. Tyler found a way to approach it for $3.1 million by buying an existing structure. You see, there are different ways to approach it to make dollars go further. So when you say no more new taxes, kind of like when you go to your boss, you say, I need a raise. He says, sorry, not getting a raise. We don't have the money. And in federal and in state government and local government, every dollar more we take in is taken out of your pocket. Let's not forget that. It's not coming from some piggy bank in the sky. It's coming out of your pockets. And so it's time we say no. And that forces pressure upon politician types like us to say, not going to be any more. So what are we going to cut? What wasteful programs can we cut? What can we do more efficiently? We need pressure. Politicians need pressure to do more with less. just like you in running your businesses face pressure. There's no big piggy bank you can raid. There's no taxpayer you can say, we're just going to increase your rates. You need pressure, and that pressure does the job of helping us find ways to do the job better.
So what would you cut?
Oh, I would cut corporate welfare. I would cut payments to Apple. I would cut payments to NASCAR. I would cut payments to Formula One. I would cut redirection of money that is intended for the transportation system and is going to bus systems that very few people ride. Does that answer the question?
Mayor? Yes, thank you.
Well, I mean, you know, corporate welfare, I get that. But you're not talking, you're talking about a small amount of money, you know, that against a huge issue. We have infrastructure crumbling, ladies and gentlemen, all over this state. You know, the monies that we're talking, we can talk here locally what we had to spend, and then you can, you know, kind of look at and extrapolate what it could be on a state level. It's a huge number. I agree we need to cut back like we all do, but we have to have a program that identifies exactly what that need is. We can keep talking about all these things that we could do, but let's talk about what we will do, and that is to put in place an actual plan that identifies exactly what type of dollars we're talking about. And I've not yet seen that plan. You know, we're also talking about population growth. Right here in our city, you know, not only with what the population is inside the city limits, but the number of people that come to Longview every day and driving our streets and roads, ladies and gentlemen, is somewhere in between 120 to 150,000 people a day. And then when you talk about Christmas and the holidays, it goes up to 200, 250. Okay, how do we plan for that? But we're gonna have to do that. And yes, I agree we gotta cut, you know, some of the different giveaway programs, but you got to be careful when you do that, because action breeds reaction. We need to know what we're doing, and we need to do it in a way that is credible and that we can put together the right types of dollars that we're going to need to address this in a long-term way. It's nothing that's going to happen overnight.
Mayor Dean, this will be for you first, and then Mr. Watts. Another funding question. Public school finance. It's back in the hands of the courts. In the last legislative session, an effort to revamp funding and accountability didn't get out of the House. I'm wondering what efforts you would support to move Texas away from its current system of funding and accountability, or if you think it works as it is.
Well, obviously it doesn't work as it is. I mean, another report just recently that the state of Texas rates 44 out of 50 from an education perspective. And I know that they're putting really great schools like we have in this area, this region, with some of the schools in the metropolitan areas that just don't meet the standards. You know, we have great schools in this area that don't get the first dollar of state or federal funding that do a great job. There is a formula put together to address our public education issues, and we have to work diligently to find it. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest problems we have with economic development is we're not preparing our kids, you know, for the skill sets that we need to have to attract. When we bring companies in from out of state, the first thing they look at is what kind of education do we provide, because they're looking at where their children are going to go. But what we've got to do with the funding, we've got to try to bring it back to the local level. And we have great local leadership in most cases that can help us with what it actually takes to, you know, educate our children and come up with a funding formula. You know, a disappointing thing to me is as I go around and talk with educators, and I talk with school board members, the current funding matrix is so out of control, they don't even know where their money comes from. Now, when you talk about a school board that has to adopt a budget, and the budget is put together, and they raise their hand to support a budget, and they really don't know where their money came from, that's scary. And we have to get a better, more transparent plan in place so everybody understands how and where that money is going to come from. We don't have that today.
Yeah, public education funding. So the current system is built on a crumbling foundation of the property tax system. The property tax system essentially is a bureaucrat's guess as to what your property is worth based upon their guess about what your property is worth. It's a corrupt, broken system. It is the entire system is controlled by the taxing entities, the county, the city, and the school districts, who appoint board of directors to a board who hire a chief appraiser. And when you go and protest your property taxes, if you wonder why they don't listen, it's because they don't listen to you. They listen to the taxing entities they work for. The foundation is broken. The first thing we have to do to better fund education is to eliminate the property tax system in Texas. That's the number one thing. The best approach I've seen is you replace it with a simple, easy to administer consumption tax. It's a higher sales tax. Now you're in charge. It's not a bureaucrat telling you, well, your house is worth this, and now we're raising your valuations, which, by the way, the board of directors know the kind of increases they need to provide to keep the cities and the counties and the school districts happy. So again, the system is rigged. Now it's you. When times are tight, you spend less. When times are booming, you spend more. And that's the perfect kind of system. That sort of foundation is what we need the legislature to grapple with and put in place. The second piece is we need to refocus Texas K-12 funding on Texas students. We're educating Mexico and Central America. I've talked to countless teachers at their door that say, David, because the immigration system is broken, because, not the system's broken per se, but because they're flooding across the border. Those students are in the classroom and they're destroying education for Texas students. A Pew Research study says at least $1 billion a year is what it's costing you, the taxpayer, to educate non-citizen children. We need to directly challenge that old Supreme Court ruling and make our Texas case. Our Texas dollars are for Texas children, period.
Just briefly, Mayor, do you support replacing the property tax with an increase in sales taxes?
Well, you know, I've listened to my opponent talk about this consumption tax thing a number of times, and you know, at our recent forum we had up at Oakland Heights Baptist Church, walking out of the meeting, I had a number of retirees, veterans, people on fixed income come up and say, hey, what about me? What about me? I mean, you're talking about, I've heard his number anywhere from 18 to 20% consumption tax. I understand that we need to review that, but you can't do away with property tax as well. It just doesn't work that way, because you're going to put overbearance on some and not enough on the other. It's got to be a combination in how we work together to put together the right plan in place. You know, and as far as appraisal boards, and how that whole process works, you know, there is a place already, there's a process in place already when it comes to appraisal board. They're appointed by the cities, by the county, by the schools, and if you, the voter, do not like the people that are being put on that board, there's one simple thing you can do. It's already there. You fire the people on the school board, the people on the city council, people in the county commissions court, okay? They're the ones that are appointing those people. If you don't think we're getting the right people there, elect somebody else. But the process is there. And again, you have to go back to the state, because a lot of what these local appraisal boards are following are being handed to them, you know, from the state. And so we should do our work there.
Mr. Martin,
Yeah, follow up to that. So I want to clarify, I've never said the words 18 to 20%.
Well,
So
I'm talking about what people at the door tell them.
Okay, I have never said 18 to 20%. I want that clear. Well, there's one study out there that says maybe 11%. Another study says maybe 15%. That's for the legislature to grapple with. If I heard Jay correctly, he said we can't get rid of the property tax. We have to keep both. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
You want a higher sales tax and a property tax?
Yeah.
That's a disaster. You need to gut the property tax system completely. You need to gut the franchise tax, the business property tax. I've had business owners say, you see these chairs in my restaurant? I pay for those chairs every single year. It's insane. Gut that tax, gut the franchise tax, gut the property tax, have one simple sales tax. Florida is studying it. They're ahead of us. And they realize we're going to be a magnet for people to move to, because we have no income tax, we'll have no sales tax, we'll have no income tax and no property tax. Texas needs to join in that effort. Now, you don't keep both. What you do is you get rid of the property tax system. Secondly, it's really indirect to say, well, if you don't like the people on the board of directors, you fire the city councilman or something. That's real indirect. If we can't get where we want to get, where we gut the property tax system, here's a solution. Make that chief appraiser run for office directly.
Amen.
Now you can look across the table from them. And when they're dishonest with you and when they're not straight with you, you say, we're going to fire you. And we're going to replace you with somebody better. Don't do this sort of indirect thing where then I have to find the councilman and try to get them out of office and hope that maybe the city council together will give me a better member on the board. Just fire the chief appraiser. That's another approach.
Mr. Brock, since he addressed what I said is that, putting a consumption tax in place of a property tax all at one time puts an undue burden on a certain group of our population. And I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think that what we need to do is figure out how we come up with a fair tax system that doesn't put undue pressure on any one group. And I don't think that a consumption tax wholly, to this point, regardless if it's 15, 18, 20, whatever his number seems to be today, it is something that what we're going to have to do is figure out what works best for everybody, for our state. And I don't think one of these by themselves do that. And I don't disagree that there's issues with the property tax, but I don't think that going to strictly a consumption tax fixes that. And I think there's good studies that are being shown that say that.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go to closing statements. I started this by asking you what the issues are that you hear most from folks when you're on the campaign trail. I want to know what you think, what each of you think is the single most important issue that will face the legislature in the next session, and what will you do about it? The single most important issue that will face the legislature if you win. What will that be, and what will you do about it? Mr. Watts, that'd be for you first.
Yeah, I think the single greatest issue we will face in the Texas legislature is too much spending and too much government. Glenn Hager, your controller, built the state budget revenue forecast on the idea that the price of oil per barrel would be $65 to $75 a barrel. Where is it today? 28, 29? I didn't check this morning. Very, very low. Very low. We're going to face serious revenue issues in the state of Texas in the 2017 session. Too much spending, too much government. We need less spending and less government. That's going to be the key issue for us. We have to stop growing government. Every year, government grows larger and larger and larger. And here's an example I've shared before. When Jay finished his time, 10 years as mayor, we appreciate his service, but when he finished his time as mayor, the city tax-supported debt was up over the beginning of his time 18.5%. The tax dollars consumed were up 41%. The budget was up 30%. More debt, 18.5% more debt per capita. That takes into account population growth. More people, but still per capita, the debt was up 18.5%. When we pointed that out last week, Jay said, as mayor, I don't even get a vote unless there's a tie. But the city charter says the mayor may vote on every proposition. And in the city council minutes, Jay voted time and time and time again. You need somebody that won't leave more debt. It's interesting that Tyler has $0 of tax-supported debt. That's not an accident. That's a fiscal responsibility strategy. And you need that kind of leadership in Texas because spending and debt will be the key issue. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like you to respond to that and then answer the previous question.
Well, I will, and I want to start off with showing a graph I have here, and hopefully I can visit with you and show this to you. And I want to say to the citizens along you, if you'll call me at 903-720-8460, I'll also make sure you get a copy of this. And basically what it shows is that over my tenure from 05 to 015, this is what the tax rate did. Even with the voter-approved projects that were approved in 07 and 2011, voter approved by 70% of the voters of the city of Longview. And what I do take somewhat offense about is that this wasn't projects that I brought to the voters of Longview. It was thousands of people working together as volunteers that said, hey, we want some things done in our city of Longview. Let's talk about fire stations where we had fire engines that didn't even fit in our fire stations anymore. Let's talk about widening of Silver Falls Road. Let's talk about Lear Park. How many of you have been to Borman Trail? What about the streets in downtown Longview that were falling apart? The water and sewer lines that were costing us millions of dollars to fix because they were so old. What about the south side of Longview where the roads were so old they were crumbling and coming apart? You know, you can invest now or later, but the citizens of Longview wanted things done, and they went out and they voted for that. So unlike my opponent, I do listen to what the people of my community say and what they want. And when you talk about what our rate did, let me show it to you. One last thing about Tyler. He likes to, maybe he likes living or working in Tyler. I don't. I love Longview. Let me tell you this. Tyler made a decision to use their economic development 4A money, which is about $8 to $10 million a year, for infrastructure projects. The city of Longview decided to use their money to recruit, retain businesses here in Longview. Had we used that same $8 to $10 million a year to provide projects, we wouldn't have needed to bring anything to the voters, but we did because the voters wanted this work done.
Mayor,
now, what should I address the?
Yeah, I'd still like to hear from you on the one issue, and then after that, I'll ask Mr. Watts if he'd like to respond to what you said.
Sure.
But go ahead on.
I think. Look, the state budget has consistently grown. It went up 12% the last session. I know from being a mayor, we had a $160 million a year budget. And I know in a budget of that size that there's always things that can be cut. And part of the reason why our tax rate stayed so consistent, if you will, is because we found ways to provide services at less cost. We can do that at the state, and as your state representative, I will work diligently to provide the same type of leadership and experience that I did here in the city of Longview to reduce that budget as soon as we possibly can. And we're going to have to now with what's going on in the oil and gas business.
Thank you. Are we ready to go to closing
Did you get
statements?
reply?
Or would you like to reply?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Please.
So, at the end of Jay's 10 years as mayor, the city of Longview has $77 million of tax-supported debt. That's from Glenn Hager's, not my number. Texas Comptroller works for you. $77 million of debt. Tyler has zero. And that's not because they spent $8 million out of their economic development fund. It's because of a strategy that respects taxpayer money. Now here's the dirty little secret of local politics. Folks like to say, well, we kept our tax rate the same. We kept our tax rate the same, you see. We didn't raise taxes on folks a bit. But yet somehow the city consumes 41% more tax dollars at the end of Jay's 10 years than at the beginning. How does that happen? Here's the dirty little secret of politics that allows politicians to say, we didn't raise taxes. Your home valuations keep going up and up and up. So yes, it's the same 0.50 rate, but your valuations go up and up and up. And if you'll notice in the city budget, for Longview city budget, one of the title pages, it will always say, this budget raises $500,000 more than the last budget, or $1 million more. Not because the tax rate changed, but because valuations keep going up. Those members on the board of directors appointed by the city know what they need to do. They know how they need to increase your valuations because the city keeps spending more and more and more. 30% more than when Jay began. Everything was more. 58 more head count than at the beginning. More head count, more debt, more spending, more budget. And we can say the tax rate was the same, but it's funded by valuations going up and up and up and up. That's what we have to stop. Thank you.
We'll start with you for your closing statement, Mr. Watts.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be here with you and to talk and to reason together. It's an honor to be able to run, to be your state representative. We must deliver less government. Jay suggested we don't listen to the voter. I've heard from the thousands of doors, people say, I want less government. Finally, somebody says it the way I believe it. We want less government. Quit giving us excuses, give us less government, give us more liberty, get off our back, quit spending more, quit regulating more. That's what people are saying. And we have pointed out many times, and the numbers don't lie. The city of Longview during Jay's tenure went up and up with spending, with budget, with the consumption of tax revenue. When we pointed out last week, you know, this has to fall somewhat, at least, to the leadership of the mayor. Jay said the mayor doesn't even get a vote, except there's a tie. And then we show in the city charter the mayor may vote on every proposition. We point out in the city council meetings, your mayor voted time and time and time again. But I found an interesting example where Jay voted to break a tie. The city was wrestling with who do we give our collection business to? MSB, a company that does that, or Linebarger. And the city employees had been asked to research this, and twice they selected MSB. But the city council came back to reconsider that. One of the city council members said, why are we meddling in this? 3 council members voted for MSB. 3 council members voted for Linebarger. Jay broke the tie, gave the city's collection business to Linebarger. Guess who gave Jay a $1,000 contribution back in December? Linebarger. This is the sort of circular corruption you get with officials giving business to companies and then turning around and also collecting a couple of years later donations. We need less government, more liberty without compromise. And I hope you'll help us in that process. Thank you.
Mayor Dean.
Okay. I was going to use the negative approach, but I'm going to throw that out the door. That's not the way I do, and I've always been a high road campaigner. I understand that my opponent's Kansas City-based consulting company, Axiom, has told him the best way to attack is by going after my record. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I stand by my record. You know, the folks in Longview, the good citizens of Longview elected me 4 different times. We were very transparent. I was humbled and honored to serve as your mayor. And I listened to you tell us what you thought the projects were. You know, we started a whole series of town hall meetings after the first year as mayor because I didn't feel like we were understanding what was on the minds of our citizens. You know, as I talked to people out in the public and what I heard at City Hall wasn't the same. So every other month we held in a different district of the city a town hall meeting where people came out and talked to us and talked to the council, talked to the staff about what the issues were. And then what we did, we said, okay, let's figure out how we solve these issues and these problems, and we worked together. Like I said tonight, thousands of people putting their time in. You know, we had one plan called the Vision 2010 we did in 06 and 07. There was a bond election again. We can discuss, you know, the debt, but it was voter approved by 70-30. They knew exactly what was entailed if there was going to be a tax increase. And again, we didn't have to raise our taxes to fund the bond election. Okay, so we do listen. And I'm very proud of the projects and the accomplishments we had in this city. And as your next state representative, I will work for the entire district, Gregg and Upshur County, to bring the same type of energy to the job to make sure that no one in Austin forgets who we are anymore. Thank you. God bless you. Thank y'all for being here.